It was the year 1249, and the army of King Afonso III of Portugal, joined by the Knights of the Orders of Santiago and Avis, reached the last great Muslim city in the southwest of Hispania. Their objective: conquer it and then the Reconquista in Portugal, but such enterprise would require great patience. During the reign of King Sancho II, Portugal witnessed a significant expansion of its borders to the south. This expansion was largely attributed to the crusading bulls issued by the papacy in 1234 and 1241. As early as 1232, Pope Gregory IX granted the King of Portugal the privilege of not being excommunicated by anyone but the Bishop of Rome, provided that the monarch remained committed to the Reconquista. Thus, inspired by the support from Rome, Sancho II found motivation to pursue southern expansion after years marked by his father's inertia due to disease and conflicts with the aristocracy. From 1238 to 1242, the Order of Santiago, following a strategic plan devised by Sancho II, embarked on a campaign south of the Tagus River with the objective of reclaiming as much territory as possible for Portugal. In 1238, Mértola and Alfajar de Pena were conquered, followed by Ayamonte, Cacela and Alvor in the subsequent year. In 1242, Tavira, Paderne and Silves were retaken for Christianity. The expansion project faced a tragic halt 3 years later due to a large-scale civil war in Portugal. King Sancho II, deposed by Pope Innocent IV, clashed with his brother Afonso, appointed curator by the Bishop of Rome. The conflict persisted until 1248, when the former king, Sancho, died in Toledo. Afonso thus became the new monarch, and the third one to bear that name in Portugal. Despite the interruption caused by the conflict, the majority of the Algarve conquest had already been accomplished, with only the far southeast region remaining. The only pockets of resistance were encountered in Lolé, Algesur, Porches, Albufeira, and more notably, Faro. After Afonso's triumph over his brother, the kingdom remained far from unified, as several nobles perceived the new king as an usurper. Many of these nobles had fled to Castile with the deposed king during his retreat to Toledo in late 1247 and continued to reside there. Some even aided King Ferdinand III in the pivotal conquest of Seville in 1248, choosing to remain in Castile for the rest of their lives. In an effort to unify Portugal, Afonso III embarked on a military venture he believed would garner support from a significant portion of the aristocracy, the conquest of Faro, and the subsequent end of Muslim Algarve. However, the monarch encountered an unexpected poor response, as many noblemen outright refused to fight alongside him, given his role in dethroning his brother. Afonso III found himself in a precarious situation, desiring to overshadow his brother's glory in the previous conquests made in the Algarve region. However, he had other motivations for the quest, particularly concerning the neighboring and increasingly powerful Kingdom of Castile. Ferdinand III had proven himself to be one of the greatest warrior kings in the Reconquista, having reclaimed more territory than any other Hispanic Christian king. By 1248, the grand city of Seville surrendered to him, paving the way for Ferdinand to seize the remaining Muslim strongholds in Algarve. Despite this possibility, Afonso might have seen Ferdinand's conquest as an opportune moment to attack the Taifa of Niebla, due to the impact of the loss of Seville. Still, the Portuguese king could not risk anything, and resolved to seize Algarve for Portugal as soon as possible. Consequently, in the Cure of 1248 it was decided that the enterprise would take place. The urgency of Afonso's decision was evident, as the campaign was slated to be launched in February, during the winter, a particularly unfavorable time for waging war. After the Curia in November 1248, Afonso III began meticulously planning the campaign at the castle of Forém, finalizing the plans by February 1249. During this time, he began gathering funds to pay his troops, a challenging task given the limited resources due to the recent civil war. It is believed that the monarch sought financial assistance from the church, specifically the tithes designed for crusades, as he was preparing for such an undertaking. The assembled knights were not necessarily from the most prestigious families. Some were even bastards seeking to prove themselves through martial prowess, as their family names were not sufficient. Still, a great number of members of the Christian military orders of Avis and Santiago, who had recently participated in the siege of Seville, joined the monarch, as they were ready for another conquest. During the months spent in Ourique, Afonso negotiated with many noblemen, accepting their terms in exchange for their valuable participation. In the end, the king managed to assemble an army of 1,500 cavalrymen and 3,500 infantrymen from various regions, including Porto, Coimbra, Guarda, Santarém, Castelo Branco, Lisbon and Évora. In addition to the orders of Avis and Santiago, the Hospitallers would also be present in the campaign. Furthermore, an armada was being put together in Lisbon. The land army commenced its march from the castle of Ourique in February, reaching Santarém and progressing swiftly to Évora and Beja within a few days. The journey continued to Almodovar and Safir, where the Knights of the Order of Santiago, led by Dom Paio Correia, joined King Afonso and his men. From Safir, the order assumed the role of guides, utilizing the knowledge they acquired from being scouts. By the time the army reached the city of Faro, it had covered a distance of a few hundreds of kilometers. Simultaneously, the armada was close to depart from Lisbon. Faro, at that time, stood as the most well-defended city in all of Muslim Algarve, boasting a large fort with thick walls, a moat, a barbican, an arsenal of weapons, a considerable military force, and a numerous population. Additionally, the Muslim Taifa of Niebla, where the city was situated, was on high alert due to the conquest of Seville by Ferdinand III in 1248 and the resolution of the Portuguese Civil War in the same year. Upon the arrival of the Portuguese monarch and his army in the first days of March, the Christians immediately took strategic positions outside the city walls. Shortly thereafter, Afonso presented an offer to the besieged, asking for their surrender, but it was promptly rejected. The stage was set for the commencement of the siege. After the Muslims rejected the terms, Afonso blocked the city. His plan was simple: wait for the Muslim surrender. The monarch knew he had time, for no reinforcements would come from any Muslim Taifa, due to the many conquests in the Algarve by Sancho II and the fall of Seville by Ferdinand III. The only serious possible threat would have to come from the Marinids of Morocco, which would have the besieged holding on for hope. The blockade encompassed the entire city, with Afonso strategically dividing his army into different sectors, each led by trusted captains. Afonso himself led one sector, overseeing the castle walls near the so-called Friar's Gate. Another sector was under the command of Dom Paio Pérez Correia, the master of the Order of Santiago, covering the area from that gate to the Ville. Dom Pedro Estranho managed the smaller third sector, and Dom João Pérez de Abuim was responsible for the final one. 4 camps were established around the city in each sector to monitor the besieged during the night. The chronicles describe intense pressure during the block, with trebuchets being constantly employed. Additionally, the fleet of galleys and naus from Lisbon arrived a few days later, positioning itself on the Ria Formosa to reinforce the blockade. These naval forces showed the king's precautious side, given that he knew that if Muslim forces from Granada or the Marinids appear, it would be with ships. The besieged inhabitants soon realized they could not rely on outside help. As the pressure mounted, the city's governor, Albuambre, recognized surrendering as the best option. Eventually, he yielded the castle to Afonso. Shortly after the terms were agreed upon, Afonso and approximately 10 of his men entered the castle to formally take control. But unbeknownst to them, the conflict was far from over. Taking too much time inside the castle, suspicions were raised among Afonso's army, particularly Dom Paio, that maybe the monarch had fallen into a trap. Consequently, Dom Paio ordered this sector to charge into the city and rescue the king. The Portuguese army attacked the Friars' Gate, prompting the Muslim forces to launch projectiles at the advancing Christians. Witnessing the chaos, the King of Portugal swiftly ascended the castle walls, displaying the keys of the city to his men, and called off the attack. In response, the Muslim governor did the same, preventing unnecessary bloodshed. The negotiations then proceeded smoothly, with the governor being able to grant his people survival and property. They would now be living under a new king, who became their new protector. Furthermore, those who desired to live with their property were allowed to do so. As for the Muslim knights present during the siege, they swore their oath to Afonso III, who became their new lord. After a mere 30 days of siege, the great city of Faro was now integrated into the Kingdom of Portugal. Not too long after, the religious military order of Santiago conquered Lolé and Aljubarrota, while the order of Avis, Porches and Albufeira. The Reconquista was thus over in Portugal after half a millennia of fighting, and the modern-day borders of continental Portugal established.